Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. So this is part 2 in a series of stop motion animation videos. In the last video, I showed you guys how to get up and running with a really budget setup that costs less than $30, lighting and backdrop and all. And in this video, I'm going to show you what to do with the frames after you've taken the photographs. What I do is I work in Premiere Pro, which you can get for $30 if you sign up for a monthly plan with Adobe. And the first thing that you want to do when you launch Premiere Pro is to go into your preferences and change the still image default duration to be 1 frame long. So that way, if I drag a folder full of frames or photographs into Premiere, then each frame is exactly 1 frame in length, whereas by default, I think they're 150 or 120 frames long. Now, in retrospect, I kind of wish I had set this up, made my settings have 2 frames long instead of 1 frames, because it's very rare that you animate in ones when you're doing stop motion. I found myself changing the duration to most of these frames to 2s, meaning that each photograph lasted for 2 frames. So if I'm working in 24 frames a second, then there would be 12 photographs for every second of animation. Now, what I'm doing here is because I've photographed these at high resolution, the images are way too high res for even a 1080p canvas. So I resized the image down and I copied those settings to all the other frames. Now, what I'm doing here is, like I mentioned earlier, is I'm increasing the duration of each frame to being 2 frames long. So that's why I wish I had set this up correctly when I did my preferences. And I'm also adjusting the timing. So this is what's really cool about working with stop motion, is that with just a handful of frames, I can have many seconds of animation. So what this animation is basically about is just the biped standing and waiting. Probably the most boring thing to animate, but I tend to like idle animations. I think they have a lot of storytelling potential. And so this is some guy just standing around looking at his watch, and he's clearly waiting for somebody or something. Could be waiting for a bus. We don't actually know. And that's, I think, part of the intrigue of this story starting in this way. But what I'm doing is I'm playing with the lengths of each of the frames so that I can get my timing right. So for example, if he looks to one side and pauses there, well, I don't need to take multiple pictures of him just standing and looking to one side. I just have to take that photograph once and increase the length of that frame. And you can see visually that starting to come together in my timeline. You can notice how some frames are only 2 frames long, and that's usually when there's some sort of animation or movement transitioning from one pose to the next. But some frames are fairly long, and those are for when the character is supposed to just be standing still in that one position. Now, I've sped up this video, so you're not really getting a good sense for the actual timing, but I will show you in the last video what the completed animation looks like. So anyway, I go through this process for the entire sequence, and I'm just going to skip ahead now and talk about the king, because that's the next thing you want to do, is get rid of all the green stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the File, New menu and create a color matte. And I'm just making a color that's really different from the green so that I can put this behind my frames and assess how good of a job I'm doing keying out the green. The tool or effect that I'm going to use is called Ultra Key. So I type that in the little search bar. You use the eyedropper color in the Ultra Key and just pick like the green that is most visible behind the character. And there's all kinds of settings within that you can play with. By default, I usually pick aggressive in one of those drop-down menus, but you can also just keep it at the default setting and then go down and play with the sliders. There's all kinds of tweaks that you can make. And this is a really great tool for getting rid of the green because it has edge detection and contrast detection and color similarity detection, and it combines all these to allow you to pull off the green, but not pull off the spill that might be flowing into your character through bounce light. And I have plenty of it. There's plenty of green hitting the character, and yet the Ultra Key is able to ignore that. Now, you can see that because the green foam that I used to cover the stand is so different in color, I have to apply a second Ultra key. But what I do first is I nest all my frames, and that's why my entire sequence looks like a single block right there. And then I applied a second Ultra key to that nested sequence so that I could eyedrop a second color, which was the color of the foam. And then finally, since I don't really need to worry about anything that's directly outside of the character, I use a garbage mat, and there's 4-point, 8-point, and 16 points available. This is the 16 point. And you can use this to essentially cut out anything that is outside of the character. And all of these points can be animated, so that if the character moves, I can move those points out of the way. Now 16 points is a little overkill for something this simple, so I'm just going to go with 4-point. That way it's really easy to just quickly mask out any extraneous information and save me a whole bunch of time for cleanup later on. You probably noticed already that one of the big mistakes I made with this is that the green, the character wasn't really placed in a good spot relative to the camera angle, and so there's a couple spots where the character's arm goes outside of the green screen. So I'm just going to go through and clean those few. There's like maybe 5 frames where that happens, so it's not that big of a deal. I can open up each of those frames and I can clean them up individually in Photoshop. But by doing the garbage mat technique, it means I only have to worry about doing cleanup on only the parts immediately outside of the character, and I don't have to worry about any other part of the canvas. So the garbage mat is a really great tool for this. And that's essentially the steps I go through to key out all the green. I start with the Ultra key. If I need to pick secondary colors to key out, I nest my sequence so that I can apply a second Ultra key onto that sequence. And nesting you do by selecting your frames and right-clicking on it, and there's a nesting option. And with the second Ultra key, I can eyedrop some other green colors like the foam. And then the final step is to use the garbage mat and apply the necessary keyframes to those pieces so that it never actually cuts the character itself. So that's it for this part of the tutorial. In the next one, I'm going to show you the finished animation, and I'm going to dive into creating the background art and how to turn this into something that looks more fleshed out, something that I could actually just render out and publish on YouTube as part of a could be my own little comic series. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, I know that I kind of went through this pretty quickly, but if you have any questions, let me know. Leave it in the comments, message me, or post on my wall on facebook.com/armature9, and you can send me emails at store@digitaldouble.com. Thanks guys, bye.